If paying more attention to shop safety is on your list of New Year's resolutions, stick around. We're going to cover a couple of very useful tips on this installment of Shop Tales and Lore. Normally, the bandsaw is considered one of the safer tools in the shop, but certain scenarios can pose significant risks. Let's take a look at that opening shot once more. Too often I see even experienced professional woodworkers with their hands suspended above the table like this. If the blade were to hit a void in the material or the operator loses focus momentarily, the hands could wind up in the path of the blade. A much safer approach is what we call a sliding technique. It looks something like this. The fingers maintain contact with the table surface, acting as a brake against any sudden uncontrolled forward movement, while the thumbs guide the workpiece through the cut. Here's a closer look. Let's look at it from the back of the saw for a little different perspective. Keep in mind the point with this scrap material is not to necessarily saw a straight line, but to demonstrate this method of feeding the work. If this were an actual workpiece, I would probably place one hand beyond the blade, in other words, in the area in the foreground of this shot, to help steady the work and stay on the intended cut line, while I use the other hand with this sliding technique to advance the piece through the cut. This sacrificial push block is handy when cutting narrow strips of material. It can be made from scrap pieces of 2x stock, and it prevents damage to those expensive commercial versions. Start by cutting a roughly 10-inch long piece of 2x. Look for a piece with no cupping or twisting. Next, lay out a straight line about a ½ inch from one of the long edges, and a second line 90 degrees to the first one, about 1.5 inches from one end. Now cut out the notch you just marked. This might be a good time to practice the sliding technique of anchoring the hands to the table that we talked about earlier. To make the block a little more comfortable to use and to improve its appearance, I knocked off the corners along the top edge before heading over to the sander. Now just ease the sharp edges at the sander, except along the notch that will come in contact with the piece you are ripping when the block is in use. Here's a good look at why a sacrificial push block is sometimes needed. This is a setup to cut strips that are only 3/16 thick. As you can see, this commercial push block is too big to fit between the fence and the blade, even though it is only a 1/2 inch thick. In fact, you can see the score line where this block was damaged in a similar operation at one time. Let's try out the new block. Well, the block did its job. We have a smooth, uniform strip, and both the strip and the waste piece were pushed completely and safely past the blade. Eventually, the small tab left by the cut will break off. When that happens, just toss the block and make another one. After all, it's free.